So it's no secret that I'm from Western Pennsylvania, and Western Pennsylvania is fortunately packed full of many stories from our past that I can delve into for this series, Retracing History. But there is one elephant in the room when it comes to talking about Western Pennsylvania history, and I've been kind of scared to cover it. The reason being how monumental this event was. That's the Johnstown flood of 1889. Now, I've been invested into history at a very young age, and the first historical event that got me hooked on the history bug was, in fact, the Johnstown flood. So this event holds a special place in my mind. Well, I'm gonna try to get over my apprehension because where do I begin with the story of one of the largest disasters in American history? Over 2,000 people killed when an earthen dam that was owned by some of America's most wealthy collapsed, and nobody was really punished for the negligence. Well, I think the best way is just to wing it and do it piecemeal. So this isn't necessarily going to be a series of consecutive videos on the flood. Rather, I am opening a new chapter of retracing history. So for the first time, we are going to talk about an aspect of the Johnstown flood. And we're up here high in the Allegheny Mountains, where the South Fork Fishing and Hunting Club was located, and where the dam and lake that caused this great tragedy would have once been behind my shoulder.
What would become known as the South Fork Dam came into existence in the 1850s to solve a problem for the Pennsylvania Mainline Canal. And if you've not watched our Allegheny Portage Railroad video before, I highly encourage it, after you watch this, of course. That explains a little bit about the Mainline Canal that crossed the state of Pennsylvania. In order to do this, they had to build a series of reservoirs in the Allegheny Mountain on both sides to be able to fill their canal basins in Hollidaysburg and Johnstown, Pennsylvania. This one supplying the basin in Johnstown, which is about 14 miles downstream. Now, when they initially built this, it was not designed to be a massive lake. However, the dam did come to be 930 feet long and almost 70 feet tall. Typically, the reservoir had only been maintained about 10 feet. Roughly around here, there was actually a control tower that controlled the level of the water. They just needed enough to keep water flowing down to the basin in case there were droughts. Now, by the time this got built, it really didn't see much use. The Allegheny Portage Railroad, which helped get canal boats across the mountains, went under in 1854 due to competition with the Pennsylvania Railroad, and the canal itself went under shortly thereafter. So this was acquired by the PRR, and it kind of just said derelict for many years. I think it was used to supply some water to steam locomotives elsewhere, but it really had no major use for the railroad. Because of its negligence, in 1862, a portion of the center of the dam actually collapsed during a storm, and there was some minor flooding. There was a logging operation down the South Fork branch of the Little Conemaugh. Caused some damage, but nothing on the scale that would happen a few years later. And that was the state that the dam was when it was acquired in the late 1870s by an entity that became known as the South Fork Fishing and Hunting Club.
Benjamin Ruff, who was involved in an assortment of businesses in the Pittsburgh area that included the coke industry that was instrumental in the production of steel. He was also a tunnel engineer, from what I've gathered. He had involvement as a real estate broker. He was a close acquaintance also with Henry Clay Frick, who many consider the king of coke in Western Pennsylvania in the 19th century. No, not the Scarface way of king of coke. Benjamin Ruff purchased this property with the intention of making it into a private resort, and he encouraged his friend, Henry Clay Frick, to become one of its founding members, to put investments in, to whip this derelict reservoir into shape to be a beautiful lake that could hold fish and could be used for boating.
When this dam was built in 1853, the engineers at that time did include a system to control the flow of water. There was a wooden control tower that would be accessed by boat in the reservoir not far from the back of the dam. And once you got into the tower, you could control 5 discharge pipes, which made their way through a stone culvert down there, allowing the water to flow easily underneath the dam without destroying its structure, and also ensuring that there would not be a case of a massive flood. Well, by the time Benjamin Ruff had purchased his property, that control tower had caught fire and burned, and the stone culvert had partially collapsed in on itself. So there was actually a bit of a slight hump in the center of the dam. And at some point, we don't know if it was Ruff himself, it appears it was actually somebody before Ruff purchased the dam, somebody had gone in and removed the discharge pipes, probably selling it for scrap. So what Ruff had acquired was a already faulty dam. Now, some of the improvements Ruff and his team would make, and I use quotes around improvements, they used a variety of clay, stone, and even hay to fill in that sag in the middle of the dam to kind of level it out. They also made the decision, in order to get some more fill, to conceal any pockets in the dam, and they would cut down the top of the dam by several feet. Now, myth has it that that was cut down just so they can put a carriage over the road. And if you watch the History Channel's Men Who Built America, it erroneously says that Henry Clay Frick personally ordered that the dam be lowered so a carriage can get across and access the Fish and Hunting Club. In truth, you probably could already navigate to the top of the dam even before it was lowered, but by lowering the dam several feet, it made for a very fine wagon road. It also meant that the dam is far lower than it was designed, and they had never bothered to lower the spillway to compensate for the lowering of the top of the dam itself. If I was standing here in the 1880s, that would have been the water line. The Lake Conemaugh would have stretched the whole way across the rest of that valley. Again, keep in mind, the lake ran for 2 miles inland from the breast of the dam. And along the south side is where the actual club was located. There were 16 cottages initially, and they were built by various individuals. Some of them were multi-purpose, but the heart of it was this clubhouse. Now, the original portion of the clubhouse would have been located on the opposite side. It's kind of hard to see, the opposite side of the structure I'm standing in front of. That was built when was built back in 1881. This addition, which is what survives, was added in 1887, 1888, I believe. So this portion didn't actually serve the club too long, only about a year or two before the flood occurred. And the second addition is all that remains of the clubhouse.
The most famous person associated with the Fish and Hunting Club, at least to audiences in the 21st century, is that of Andrew Carnegie, famed steel tycoon who had a variety of factories in Pittsburgh, Pennsylvania. But he did not actually own any property here in the Fish and Hunting Club. In fact, there's some doubt if he ever actually even visited the club. He may have just been a charter member just because it was the in thing to do in Pittsburgh in the 1880s. If he did stay here, however, he would have checked in here to the clubhouse. That was the purpose of this clubhouse, was for many more members who could not own property here, didn't have the resource, or just weren't interested. They could still come up, rent a room or a couple rooms, and spend a few days or a few weeks vacationing in a mountain resort. And what did they get up to here? Well, there's a lot of uncertainty of what life was like here at the South Fork Fish and Hunting Club. But one of the pivotal clues we have are photographs from Lewis Semple Clark. The Clark family did own a cottage along Lake Conemaugh and vacation here very regularly in the latter half of the 1880s. And sometime toward the end of the club's history, around 1886, 87, 88, Lewis Semple Clark, who was only in his early 20s, came to vacation with the rest of his family. Now, Clark is a fascinating figure. in that he was very into mechanics, that be it the mechanic of photography, which is why he's important to the story of the flood, as he produced a wide assortment of photographs of life at the club, showing them with bands being performed right off of the stairwell right behind me here. There's photographs of boat life, of all the sailing boats that would have been lined up here in front of the clubhouse and taken out along the lake. Fishing is documented in his photographs. But bringing it back to the boats, Clark actually designed a catamaran, this motor-powered boat that operated on Lake Conemaugh in the late 1880s, which that type of technology, that was in its infancy in the late 19th century, to have these motors operating boats, powering these boats. There was at least one small steamboat also available at the club. Now, after the flood, Lewis Semple Clark would be involved with the automotive industry as that blossomed in the early 20th century. It makes sense. The guy's making motorized boats on the Lake Conemaugh. Next logical step is to start working on infancy of automobiles. He was involved for many years with a heavy truck firm. He's often credited with being one of the innovators of the spark plug. At least he didn't create the spark plug, but he definitely improved upon the design. Clark had a very long career involved with the automotive industry, stretching from its very beginnings in the very late 19th century the whole way through the Second World War. As for those photographs Clark took, nobody knew about them until 1989, when his granddaughter discovered them in the attic of her New Hampshire home, which had once been lived in by Clark. So, what are the odds? So for over 100 years from the flood happening to its centennial, we really had no idea what club life was. And to this day, we're still just starting to piece together what it was like to be here at the Fishing and Hunting Club. Just about a decade ago, in an attic here in St. Michael, somebody was able to discover... There's a truck. People are looking at me like I'm crazy. Discoveries are still being made on information about the Fishing and Hunting Club. Just about a decade ago, in an attic here in a nearby home, they found all the tax records relating to the Fishing and Hunting Club. For many years, nobody knew who owned what cottages. It was just guessed. Now we do know who lived in each cottage. We still are trying to piece together what really life was fully like here at the Fishing and Hunting Club. And you may be asking, why do we care so much about a bunch of people, rich people in the Gilded Age, and what they did in their private time? Well, it kind of all leads to showing they used all of this wealth for these extracurricular activities, and they didn't bother to maintain a certain item down the stream. The clubhouse has been a very frustrating project for the National Park Service, as well as the Friends of the Johnstown Flood National Memorial. Reason being, as I mentioned, there's not a lot of records on what life was like here at the Fishing and Hunting Club. As far as I'm aware, next to no blueprints survive of any of these structures. So restoring this in a standard sense of we're going to bring it back to how it looked in the 19th century is kind of out of the question. So what they have been doing is trying to maintain the clubhouse in its current state, which is in a semi-state of ruin. But they do actually use it. They do select tours throughout the year, and they do use this for a wide variety of educational programming. I myself have actually only been inside it once in 4th grade. They took us inside to do some programming in here. So yeah, it's an interesting restoration project, as it's never going to look as it did in the 1880s, and that's because we really don't know what it looked like in the 1880s. Except for the archaeological evidence, which includes the various paint layers. Another guest that stayed here at the clubhouse, or I make an educated guess as he did not own a cottage here, would have been Andrew Mellon. His family had helped form the Mellon Bank in Pittsburgh, Pennsylvania. It was one of the most affluent banks in the turn of the 20th century. Not just in Pittsburgh, but throughout the United States. And that's how Andrew Mellon came into the acquaintance of one of the bank's customers, Henry Clay Frick. You're seeing how all the ties are being made here to the Fishing and Hunting Club. Now, later on, after the Johnstown flood occurred, Andrew Mellon gained quite a bit of fame, as for about 10 years he was Secretary of the Treasury from the Harding,
Coolidge, and Hoover administrations. And he did a variety of other work. He was actually the ambassador to the United Kingdom at one point. One other person worth mentioning who actually owned a cottage here was Philander Knox. I believe his cottage is down the street here. Philander Knox grew out of a key banking family from Brownsville, Pennsylvania. Later, he was involved in law, and after the Johnstown flood, he would gain quite a bit of notoriety as he was the Attorney General for the Teddy Roosevelt administration, and he later had a stint as Secretary of State.
One of the few mementos that survives from the clubhouse is this oil-on-canvas painting created by French artist George Hetzel, commissioned by the club. It was later purchased by Congressman George Wirtz, whose grandson donated to the National Park Service in 2010.
The club were able to buy almost all the property relatively easily, except for this structure and corresponding barn, which has been replicated now as the visitor center for the National Memorial here. So this property was owned by a farmer. His name escapes me, but he held out as long as he could. And as long as he owned approximately 8 acres up here on the north side of Lake Conemaugh, it allowed the public to get access to the lake. So you didn't actually have to be a member of the club for many years. You could squat on this farmer's property and fish right out of the lake. His frustration was because they had raised the water level, and now part of his property was submerged in this massive lake. So this was his way of spiting the South Fork Fishing and Hunting Club. He held out for several years, but eventually he did sell to the club. I believe it was around 1886, 87, he sells the property. And this house then became the residence for the second president of the club. So after Benjamin Ruff passed away, Elias Unger took charge of operations here, and he stayed in this small farmhouse overlooking Lake Conemaugh. It would also be here where he would witness the horrors that were about to unfold on May 31st, 1889. Elias Unger arrived here on the evening of May 30th, 1889, getting ready to begin a new season here. He just returned from a visit elsewhere in the state, and when he arrived, it would have been a torrential downpour. But he was very exhausted, didn't think too much of what that would have an impact on the lake he's supposed to take charge of. But on the following morning, when he wakes up and he steps out onto this porch, he would have seen quite an alarming sight. Down here at Lake Conemaugh, the water was threatening to crest the dam. The exact measurements escape me at this time, but I believe it was approximately a foot an hour the water was rising. And that's because in addition to this torrential rainstorm that stalled over the Allegheny Mountains, just pummeling the region with water, it also means now you're flooding your tributaries. So all that water running down from the mountains is emptying into this lake. And to make matters worse, the spillway had become clogged with debris the previous night, meaning water was not escaping at an adequate rate from the reservoir. So what Unger's going to do, he's going to put on his raincoat, he's going to race across the breast of the dam, and he's going to hurry over to the clubhouse. Nearby the clubhouse, there were a group of Italian workers. They were working on essentially the sewage system. They were going to install a new sewage system at the clubhouse for the coming season. Remember, millionaires, they get this stuff in the late 19th century. So he's gonna run over and tell them, drop what you're doing, I need your help, and we gotta open up this spillway. So they're gonna run back over here, and not only are they gonna work on trying to remove debris from the fish grate, they're also going to try to start raising the top of the dam initially. Well, that's clearly not working. So Unger decides instead to tell them to give up what you're doing. We're going to have to start digging into the dam. Now this, of course, would probably get Unger into trouble with his higher-ups and have to delay the opening of the season, but it'll prevent a sheer disaster. So they're going to start cutting down through the face of the dam on multiple areas. That doesn't do anything to relieve the pressure of the dam. And after trying to get the fish grates removed, by this point, the debris had been so clogged into the fish grates, they were unable to tear them out. Really, there was nothing more he can do except wait for what was about to happen. Unger was reportedly caved from exhaustion and was carried sometime midday back to his cottage here on the north side of the lake. And then around 3 o'clock on May 31st, 1889, the center of the dam pushed forward. Now it said it did not simply, it's not that it like bursted open, it just all started to move and then kind of like sand just collapsed into the water. And it took about an hour for the whole lake to drain and go all the way down to Johnstown. It would ultimately claim the lives of 2,000 people.
The group of Italian workers trying to construct a sewage system by the clubhouse were under the charge of John Park, who was a graduate of the University of Pennsylvania with a degree in civil engineering. Park tried to assist in trying to find any possible solution to the building pressure on the dam as the floodwaters were coming down into the reservoir. Ultimately, by midday, however, he realized, just as Unger had realized, that the situation was hopeless and it was probably best to start preparing the town of Johnstown for the worst. So he rode on his horse several miles to the nearest community of South Fork, where telegraph messages could be delivered 14 miles downstream to Johnstown. The problem was there were free warnings sent. Johnstown was effectively ignoring them or taking them at a leisure pace because these warnings had come in before when floodwaters were rising by the South Fork Dam. They just kind of gotten used to these warnings. And as the situation becomes more urgent, well, the topography is deteriorated in the valley. So one of the messages cannot even get through due to trees or a washout along the telegraph lines, and they actually had to walk the message by hand a distance on the Pennsylvania Railroad. The last message did actually get a direct connection, and historians still try to figure out what happened. Apparently the telegraph lines went down into the water during the second message, but then came back up for the third one. In any case, all free warnings were at least met with a lukewarm reception by people in the valley. Park, however, would be commended for his efforts and became one of the mythical heroes of the Johnstown flood, appearing in a variety of literature produced in the aftermath of this calamity. The central exhibit of the Johnstown Flood National Memorial's Visitor Center is a massive depiction of the wall of debris at the head of the flood, and features a teenage boy clinging to life on a rooftop. This is a depiction of the story left behind by flood survivor Victor Heiser.
That is so vivid to me now. I can see every detail of the thing. I can see my watch as I looked at it at 4:20. And when this terrible noise came, my father heard that and saw me. I was trying to get back to the house, and he saw me. He was upstairs at that time. He motioned me to get up on the roof, which I did. I got up there as quickly as I could. And I still saw my father and my mother standing in the back window. They simply agonized, thinking that I was the one that was in trouble. And the next second it struck our house, it was just gone like that. It was crushed. And then I was busy. Of course, it struck me. And the barn toppled over, and I had to run up on one side. And then we began gathering speed, and I saw a house right in the way, and at the speed I thought I'd be knocked off. Well, there I was very lucky. I figured if I could be jumping. Well, the impact took place, and I hit it exactly right. I was right in midair when it hit, and I landed on the other house, and it was hit so hard, the sides fell out, and I fell down in, not fast, slowly. And I managed to crawl up, and by that time my stable, all that was left of it that I could see was a raft about the size of this room. I could recognize it with a tin roof. We went in and it jammed, and the crush was so tremendous Well, I was so busy climbing up all the time, you had no idea. You saw no water. There wasn't any water. All I saw was wreckage. And the noise and the cracking, everything going and falling and hitting everything. You had to dodge every second something was coming at you, you know. My whole idea was to keep on getting on top. And I climbed and climbed and climbed. And then a freight car rolled on in just like that. And was coming down like this. Now, my God, I can't get out of the way of that thing. And fortunately, the 3-story building collapsed. My raft shot out from under there just as the thing hit. If it would have been that much longer, I wouldn't be here to tell you about it.
The 20 million tons of water released by the collapse of the South Fork Dam would pick up anything in front of it, including rail cars. This truck was just one of many torn from the body of freight cars and would aid in the destruction of Johnstown. Debris such as this would be unearthed for years following the catastrophe. This bell once hung in the steeple of a nearby Methodist church. When the flood hit the church, the bell rang intensely due to the force of the debris making contact, and would be heard for several miles as it was carried downstream. The collapse of the South Fork Dam would lead to the deaths of 2,209 people in the valley below. Financial damages were estimated to be at $17 million in respect to the currency of the time. The United States of America had never endured such devastation like it in peacetime. Yet when it came to investigating what had caused this calamity, the South Fork Fishing and Hunting Club would not face any significant legal recourse. Rather, the members quietly abandoned the ruined resort before its assets were officially auctioned off in 1904. Analysis at the time pinned the blame of the flooding on the narrowing of river channels and high loss of life on the Pennsylvania Railroad's infrastructure in the valley, while claiming the dam itself was structurally sound. If you may allow me to be brazen for one moment, dear viewer, may I ask a simple question? If the dam was structurally sound, then why did it fail? More recent analysis of the Johnstown flood has come to reject this act of God approach, finding the root cause of the catastrophe to be negligence in restoration and operation of the dam on the part of the club. Perhaps the most fascinating report is, ironically enough, from an engineer who visited the dam 9 years before its collapse. In 1880, an engineer of the Cambria Iron Works, located in Johnstown, inspected the newly restored South Fork Dam on behalf of his boss and Fishing and Hunting Club member, Daniel J. Morrell. The engineer claimed to have seen leaks in the dam and feared the lowering of its crest would yield disaster. Benjamin Ruff admonished these claims, advising Morrell that he and his people were in no danger of the club's enterprise.
In the immediate aftermath of the flood, in the face of such tragedy, well, that didn't stop people from profiting, because with no more dam blocking access to the Allegheny Mountains, it was decided that they could access the coal fields by rail through the former reservoir. And we're literally standing in the reservoir right now in St. Michael, Pennsylvania. There is on display a series of mining carts along with a mining locomotive. And not the first time we've seen one of these on the channel. We got to explore some mining locomotives and carts in Boswell, Pennsylvania, site of what was once the world's largest coal tipple. Well, there's not much left of this one. But yeah, there were mines all throughout what used to be the reservoir and going the whole way down several miles down this, the tracks are still there today, was called the South Fork Secondary. It was opened in 1891 and I believe it still operates today, though I think most of the coal operations have died out. Sometimes when you come down to the flood memorial, you'll find rows of coal hoppers parked, but not today, not a coal hopper in sight. Within the former reservoir bed is the 1889 park. It's a township park with a playground, picnic tables, even like RV parking. And one of the coolest features is there's a coal miners memorial museum. Well, it is not open today, and in fact, every time I am here, it is never open. I believe their hours are weekends, Memorial Day to Labor Day, but there's not even anything on the doors that tell me that. So, if for some reason you who are watching know somebody or are one of the people that operate this on a limited basis, please contact me through my email. You can access that through the YouTube channel. It's readoutproductions1754@gmail.com. I would be very eager to get inside and document what you guys have on display. We're walking onto the southern abutment of the dam, and you get a breathtaking view of the Little Conemaugh River Valley. First, it's beautiful, the sight, and then it's eerie when you get a sense that something's missing. Well, what's missing is Lake Conemaugh, and then you realize why it's missing. When my parents and grandparents started bringing me up here when I was about 4 or 5 years old, I remember you can see the abutments pretty decently, but it was hard to visualize the actual lake bed. Fortunately, the National Park Service and a variety of other entities have done a commendable job in the past few years since the pandemic to restore this lake bed, getting rid of a lot of the vegetation. Amongst those efforts was, I kid you not, bringing goats out here to chew all the tall grass up. So this was all naturally removed by Mother Nature's favorite grass mowers. So commendable job to those goats.
Well, that's going to do it here from the South Fork Fishing and Hunting Club, or what was once the South Fork Fishing and Hunting Club, now the Johnstown Flood National Memorial. We're going to do more videos on the Johnstown Flood from Retracing History to Artifact Highlight in the future, though when those will come out, it'll depend on time for myself. Well, if you enjoyed this video, be sure to hit the like button, because that lets the algorithm of the TubeView and of the Rumble know that you do want to see more historical content. That yes, you do want to be edumacated on social media platforms. I know what I said. If you want to follow us on our future adventures, be sure to subscribe here to Readout Productions. You'll be the first notified when a new video is released. And if you want to go the extra mile and support this channel, keep us moving on the road, you can go to the Ko-fi link in the description below. You can purchase me a cup of coffee, which I am always appreciative of a hot cup of joe in the morning. And if you want to become part of our Garrison, which is our membership program, you can also join that for Ko-fi. There are a few benefits listed when you go to the members page. Thank you all for watching. We'll see you next time.